Polish President Andrzej Duda, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg Television. Your relationship with Volodymyr Zelensky, who's also here for the UN General Assembly, has been one of a friendship, a very warm relationship, especially at the start of the war. This war has elevated you to really a global statesman. You were this conduit between Kyiv and all these Western leaders that wanted to get into Ukraine and have access to Zelensky. But lately, we've seen some friction between this relationship, whether it's the grain issues transporting through Poland, as well as the debate within your government about financial aid to Ukrainian refugees that are in Poland. As Zelensky comes to the United Nations, and he's really begging the international community to still stand with Kyiv and that international support, will he continue to have your support, Poland's support, and at what cost to your own people?
Well, indeed, it is the case that right from the beginning of this war, since this full-scale Russian aggression against Ukraine, since the 24th of February 2022, it is Poland and the Polish people who are those in the closest neighborhood who have been helping most to Ukraine and to the Ukrainian people. It was us who, right from the start, decided to open our border and to take in millions of refugees from Ukraine. In total, we had several million people coming through Poland. 2 million Ukrainians are still in our country. But first and foremost, right from the start, we started to send armaments to Ukraine. We have supplied more than 300 tanks to Ukraine. We have also supplied almost all our MiG-29 jets, which we had. We sent more than 100 armored vehicles. We supplied state-of-the-art howitzers, Krab, which we produce in Poland. We also delivered a huge number of armaments, and we have been helping Ukraine all the time. This is also help which is given by ordinary people in Poland who have taken Ukrainian refugees into their homes. We believed, and we still believe, that it is necessary, and we try to serve, as neighbors should do, those who help their neighbor, their brother, who is in a difficult situation. So this is the situation that we have. We understand it perfectly well. We try to do that. But this is a war, and, you know, there are different situations, difficult situations in a war. In a war, also, normal life goes on, as the one we have in our country. There are different situations, difficult ones. That is simple.
But back to this grain deal, where there's a lot of friction at the moment. You said today that there will be a legal solution at the WTO, but then you also said that it will be, quote, good if Ukraine would remember that it does receive assistance from Poland. And then you said that Ukraine should know it is a transit country, Poland. Is that a threat to Zelensky?
No, this is not the point, to lead any kind of discussion in the media. Personally, I regret that there is a discussion going on in the media. I will try to cut it off for sure, because somebody has to be wiser here, and the situation is not easy. Let me say one thing. We try to help Ukraine. We have created transport corridors, transit corridors, precisely to transit Ukrainian grain through Poland in the direction of seaports, be it Polish seaports or the seaports in the Baltic states, to make sure that the Ukrainian grain can be exported wherever it is needed, because we have got our own agricultural production in Poland. When Ukraine started selling its grain in Poland in a completely uncontrolled way in autumn last year, when it turned out that suddenly we had a flood of Ukrainian grain on our territory, Polish farmers started to protest because it really hit Polish agricultural production very much. And we also need to protect our own market. We also have our own citizens, and we have to care for their interests. We want to help Ukraine. We transit. We have set up transport corridors. Right now, there are more than 2 times the volume of the grain which goes through Poland is 2 times as high as it was in the beginning of 2023. But we cannot allow ourselves that There is Ukrainian grain sold without any control in the Polish market, the grain which is much cheaper, which is not up to all the European Union norms, not up to all the standards of the EU, and this is a gigantic, huge production. In a way, I do understand it. It's easiest to sell grain in Poland because we are close and the transportation costs are not big, but Poland has got its own interests as well. We also have our own citizens, and we have to care for their interest. We need to take care of them. It's a pity that our Ukrainian neighbors do not want to understand
President
it.
Zelensky is saying on Twitter, he said today, alarmingly, some in Europe play out solidarity in a political theater, turning grain into a thriller. He's not naming you by name, but clearly you guys are having a public spat. Will there be a retaliatory measure from Poland?
We are trying to create, as I said, the best possible conditions to make sure that Ukrainian grain can be transited through Poland. But let me also draw your attention to the fact that the problem, especially the problem in the media, is being made out of this whole issue by our Ukrainian neighbors. We are not the ones who are creating a problem. We try to help them as much as we can, but it is just normal that every authority has to take care of their citizens. We are also democratically elected Polish authorities. We are elected in elections, and it is our duty to care for the interests of our voters. I believe that here in the United States, not only all politicians, but also all citizens who cast their votes in the elections to the Congress, in local elections, in presidential elections, understand it perfectly well. This is what they also expect from their politicians. This is what they expect from the American president, that he will care first and foremost for American interests. It is my duty to take care especially of Polish interests, the interests of Polish citizens, of my compatriots, of my fellow citizens. This is what we are trying to do. We do have a problem caused by Russia, because it is Russia who is responsible for unleashing the war in Ukraine. It was Russia who invaded Ukraine, and it is Russia, actually, who is to be blamed for all these problems. We need to solve them somehow. I can only make an appeal to stop attacking us in the media. We really try to do a lot to support our Ukrainian neighbors, and we have sacrificed a lot. We have given a lot in order to help Ukraine, and we want to assist Ukraine because we understand what it means to be placed under Russian aggression. But we also need to protect our citizens, and this is our fundamental duty.
When you're talking about protecting your citizens, you have an election next month in Poland, and right now the far-right Confederation is gaining in the polls. Is there a concern that in your society there is fatigue about aiding Ukraine and fatigue about the support that Poland is giving to Kyiv? The election is coming in Poland. It is a parliamentary election, however, but I'm in my second term as president of Poland. I did not run in these elections. I just observed them. I also follow the campaign, which is ongoing. However, it is a fact that the war in Ukraine, the one started by Russia, by its full-scale attack more than a year and a half ago, has been going on for a very long time. As I said, a few million Ukrainian citizens lived in our country. About 2 million still live there. They are among us. There are many different problems, also people-to-people problems. And because of that, of course, there is a phenomenon of a certain fatigue. It is just normal. It is just human. A lot of Polish people have sacrificed a lot to help their neighbors from Ukraine. Having said that, the situations among people are different. There are various feelings, and of course it is also to a certain extent the case that there are some political groups who play out those emotions in a very straightforward way. Please remember, we are a direct neighbor to Russia, and it is in the interest of Russia to influence the elections in Poland. It is in their interest to decrease the support for Ukraine, to decrease the support that Poles give to Ukraine, so that Poland does not send aid to Ukraine. This is in the Russian interest today. So everybody who attacks Poland today, everyone who, instead of sitting at the table and talking to Polish authorities, they really support Russia. That debate is also playing out, whether or not to send more aid to Ukraine in the United States. Right now, in Washington, in Congress, if there's no breakthrough from Ukraine on the counteroffensive, do you think the global support will wane?
Z mojego punktu widzenia
From my point of view, one thing is of fundamental importance. International law has to be respected. In other words, the primacy of international law has to be restored. And one of the fundamental principles of international law is respect for internationally recognized borders. We need to bring about a situation where Russia withdraws from the occupied Ukrainian territories. In a nutshell, it is important that Ukraine regains control of its internationally recognized borders. Let me put it in this way. This will mean the victory of Ukraine and the victory of the free world. Precisely this. It is not about defeating Russia. It is not about, let's say, Ukrainian troops entering the territory of Russia. No, absolutely not. We do not want it whatsoever. What we want is to make sure that Ukrainian troops are effective in dealing with the Russian aggressors so that Ukraine can regain the territories that Russia grabbed from it. When that happens, we will be able to say that the primacy of international law has been restored. And this is of key importance from the perspective of keeping peace in the
There's
future.
also a U.S. presidential election here in the United States next year. You had a nice rapport with former President Donald Trump. He's leading in the Republican primary polls. If he was to come to power, do you think the U.S. would continue to support Ukraine? Because he's been very critical of that aid going to Kyiv.
First and foremost, I'm deeply convinced, it is not only my conviction, but the conviction of many Polish politicians, that our alliance with the United States is of absolutely key importance for our security and for the security of Europe. The United States is our most important ally. From our perspective, it is not really so important who is the President of the United States. It is the decision of the American people. The obligation of Polish authorities, it is my personal opinion, is to build the best possible relationship with the United States. This is of key importance from the perspective of our security. And among others, that was the reason why in the past, of course, I didn't know who would be the president. Now we do not know who will be the president in 2025. But one of the priorities of our presidency, because in 2025 Poland will hold the presidency in the European Union for 6 months, from January until June, we will preside over the European Union. In a nutshell, Poland will preside over European Union councils. So the thing is that the priority, which is enshrined among one of the main directions of our activity in the presidency, that priority is the strengthening of transatlantic relations, boosting the alliance between the European Union and the United States. We believe that in order to safeguard the security of Europe and the world, also to safeguard economic development of the European Union, it is of key importance to cooperate with the United States. We are convinced about that, and this is what we want to support. This is what we are doing. More United States in Europe, more Europe in the United States, more cooperation between the continents, the transatlantic cooperation. This is, according to us, the key task which we should be implementing for the security of Europe and the world. And this is what we are trying to do.
Just finally, I spoke to Annalena Baerbock this weekend. She's also here for the UN General Assembly. And she said that Europe was in a total shock when Trump first came to power after the 2016 election. Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, has already said he wants Biden to win, and he's hopeful Biden would win. Will you weigh in on this presidential election for Trump or Biden?
Right from the beginning, I repeat, I was asked this question for the first time back in 2016 when the presidential election was coming in the United States. I had one of my first presidential visits, which I paid here, and I said, the American people will decide. The American people will elect the person who, according to them, will be a better president for them and for the United States. I do not vote in the U.S. I vote for a president in Poland, and I can speak in Poland about who should be a president. According to my opinion as an ordinary citizen, an ordinary voter, in the United States, it is up to the American people to decide who will be the best president for them. My duty as Polish president is to make sure that the relationship with the United States is as good as it gets. In other words, that myself as Polish president have best possible relations with the U.S. president, the incumbent and the future president, so that from the perspective of Polish-American relations, the Polish affairs are conducted in the best possible way, the most effective way.
Andrzej Duda, thank you so much for your time. Polish president.
Thank you very much. Thank you.